Hey everyone, how are you? Zabdiel Munoz here. I hope you're doing great wherever you're at. Just want to share something from my heart with you real quick tonight. You know, sometimes there are stuff from the Bible that we hear, and we hear it quoted in church sermons, and we hear Sunday mornings, and just different verses and passages from the Bible, and we don't really know the context, but we hear it quoted so often that we just assume we know what it means. But then later on, when we actually go back and see what the context around it, or what it meant to the original hearers of the day, we realize that sometimes it means even the opposite of what we thought it meant, or just something totally different. And so I believe sometimes a lot of the value of some passages is lost because of that very reason. We take them out of context, and you know, I think so many terrible doctrines, horrible theology has been made simply by taking stuff out of context. And so I just want to just address one passage today, and it's found in Luke 21. So if you want to turn with me there, you can go right now. It's in Luke 21 verse 1 and onward, and it has to do with the widow that brought an offering to the temple, and she brought everything that she had. She brought 2 coins, and here we have Jesus looking at the people who are bringing their offerings to the temple. And usually the way it has been taught to me in the past, and just the way I always imagine it, is that, you know, when it comes time to bring an offering to the temple, God is watching. Jesus is watching. And what he's watching is to make sure that you actually give something that matters, to give something that's valuable to you. And so even if you have a little bit, you give all that you have, and it sort of puts a bad light on those who brought a lot of stuff, because they only give out of their surplus, and so they should have given more. They should have made it something that actually counted. And so usually, you know, I've seen so much bullying when it comes time for tithes and offerings, and trying to coerce people and just manipulate them, you know, using guilt and condemnation. You know, sometimes instead of preaching God the Father, we preach the Godfather, you know, and it's like, pay or else, you know, pay or else God's gonna take it from you anyway by breaking your car, or, you know, he won't rebuke the devourer. Usually, you know, people that, you know, are starting to get a revelation of grace, but they're still trying to hold on to that, you know, they'll still try to find the way to manipulate people, but just in a nice way. So they're not a mean bully, they're just a nice bully, you know, but they're still bullying using that mindset of performance. And so today, I just want to address this verse, because if you just read the 2 verses before and the 2 verses after, it gives you a completely different look at what was actually going on and what Jesus was actually addressing. And so, if you're ready, we're just go with me. So, we're actually going to read starting from chapter 20, verse 46. Now, as you probably already know, the Bible wasn't written in chapters and verses. That was added later. It's just one continual thing. So don't see like a division. This is still part of the same thing, you know. And so let's just read it. So we're starting from chapter 20, verse 46. And so Jesus just starts off by chewing off the Pharisees and the scribes. And so the people who were supposedly the experts on God in their day, the religious leaders who were supposed to be representing God, were actually doing a pretty bad job at representing his heart, and they were totally missing it. They had put the priority on outer appearance. They had put the priority on stuff like the temple and the sacrifices and all these things, but that was never God's heart. That wasn't God's original intent. And so here we go. Verse 46 says, "Beware of the scribes," Jesus is talking, "beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and love respectful greetings in the marketplaces and chief seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets." In other words, they're seeking honor from men, right? "Who devour widows' houses and for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive greater condemnation." Now, Jesus makes a pretty bold statement. He says, these guys who are supposed to be the religious leaders are devouring widows' houses. Now, my question to you is how? How are they devouring widows' houses? Were they literally going into their houses and taking what they had? What was going on? All right, literally right after Jesus said this, he illustrates to them how it is that they're taken away from the widows. So, and right afterwards, chapter 21, verse 1 says, "And he, Jesus, looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury." This is the temple treasury. "And he saw a poor widow putting in 2 small copper coins. And he said, 'Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all of them, for they all out of their surplus put into the offering, but she out of her poverty put in all that she had to live on. Now I want you to picture this. These people who are supposed to be representing God, you know, all through the Old Testaments, you know, the prophets were speaking to Israel and saying, what my heart desired, I do not desire sacrifice. I do not desire offering. I do not desire a temple. What building can you make for me to live in? You know, I don't live in temples made by human hands, you know. The prophets are declaring this, and then the religious minds just aren't getting it. And so they were supposed to be serving and giving and helping the widows and the orphans and the needy and the broken and the poor, but instead of giving to them and instead of out of their treasury serving them, they were taking. And so so instead of out of their treasury giving to the widow, they were taking from the widow for their treasury. And so that what was going, and the priority went from people and became a building. And even to this day, that's what's going on, you know. And when we see the New Testament church come in the book of Acts, it's totally flipped. They would receive money, they would receive offerings, but the offerings were used to help the poor. They were used to help the widows, and it became a place that became a place where it was people were emphasized. So what was actually important in God's heart, what was important for them, you know. And so I just want to just show you even the next two verses, you know, because right afterwards Jesus goes on to prophesy the destruction of the temple. And so verse 5, and while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, as for these things which you are looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down. So right afterwards, Jesus prophesies the destruction of the temple, and it was literally fulfilled like that. 40 years later, AD 70, the temple was completely destroyed. Not one stone was left upon another. And so God's heart, God's intention was never to live inside a temple. God never, the temple wasn't his idea. The temple was our idea. It was our way of believing that was what we had to do in order to get, but that was just a shadow. God's real desire was to live inside of you. You are his temple. You're his home. You're his house. What house can you build him? God's made a house for himself, not made by human hands, you know? And so, so God's heart was always people, but this verse, Jesus, when he was looking at what was happening, he wasn't saying like, look, this is good that, that she's given everything that she has, but it's actually almost like you can feel like God's heart was broken over the fact that, instead of giving to the widows, giving to the poor, they were taking from them. And so there's such a huge treasure that's in here that is usually lost when we use this verse just to try to convince people just to, give in the offering or give their tithes, and I just want to clarify real quick as well. I am 100% for giving, for living a generous life. Hello, God lives in you. You have more than enough. You are not living in lack. And so we live by faith. We give by faith. It's a joy. I'm a cheerful giver. I don't have to think about it twice, And so for me, I find joy in giving, so that's not, I'm not saying don't give. If you're part of a church family and you support what they're doing, then please give to them, because they need that to keep going. It takes money. Money is a tool that in order to go after and accomplish the things that God has put on our heart. And so that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm addressing. What I am addressing is the fact that so many times the focus becomes taking instead of giving. And so if most of your church money is going to building a temple or a building for God, a house for God, the moment that is emphasized instead of people, then you've completely missed God's heart and what he came to do. God did away with that old covenant temple system because that was never his heart to begin with. When we begin to emphasize a temple or a house of God in the sense of a building, then we completely lose the New Testament message, which is God lives inside of you. You are his temple. You are his home. There's nothing else he could dream of that would be better. That's what he desires. Now, I'm also not against buildings and using them, for different purposes. I believe those are very useful and helpful. And if God puts it on your heart, that's great. But make sure the first thing is first, which is people. If you keep just live out of love, And so, And so with that being said, just want to encourage you guys just to see this passage through a whole new lens. Next time you hear it used to try to convince people to give everything they have to help the temple or to help build something for the church project or whatever, just remember, understand their heart, but that's not what this passage means. There's other stuff that in the Bible that encourages giving. And so if you're at a church family and you support what they're doing, then please do give to them, because that's one way that we can invest in them, and you can and keep seeing what they're doing continue. And so love you guys. Give me feedback, give me comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And if you have any more questions, feel free to send me messages and let me know. But bless you guys. Love you. Bye-bye.